Hello and welcome to Angular Nation Beginners channel. Thanks to our sponsors AG Grid for making these events possible and free for the community. And if you're interested in expert events, you can check out the Experts channel, where there's often Angular GDs giving talks about advanced Angular topics. But today
we actually have the Angular team coming in this month.
Wow, okay, great. The whole team?
Yeah. Well, no, not the whole team. We have Jessica and Mark coming in to talk about V15. I don't know which date exactly, but soon, very soon.
Exciting, cool. So yeah, today we have Akilah Littlejohn, who's going to be giving us a talk about Angular standalone components, which are introducing version 15 officially. So with that, I'll hand over to Akilah.
All right, I am Akilah. I am the speaker of the hour, or the next 20 minutes maybe. Yeah, my name is Akilah Littlejohn. I'm a self-taught developer. I love to do things called civil hacking, so I've worked on open source projects and things like that. And today we are going to be talking about standalone components, but really, I know we had rescheduled this talk, so it really was called Let's Bootstrap an App. Let's just get started on trying to begin. How do we start with standalone components? Not necessarily an in-depth talk on standalone components. So sorry if that was I can't think of the word right now, but sorry if it was misleading you to, if you thought this was going to be a deep talk on standalone components, but I will speak as in depth as possible. Okay, so what am I not speaking about today? How to architect your projects with standalone components. As I was doing research, this is definitely a talk that needs to be had, because with great freedom comes great unmaintainability, and I've seen a lot of different styles. How now that we're using standalone components, that I can see in the future, there really needs to be something inside the style guide concerning standalone components. I remember a while back I learned about barrel files and TypeScript, and come to find out, I guess they were kind of against using things like barrel files and things like that. But with standalone components, I've seen more people using that style of architecture. So maybe as I get better, I'm nowhere near an architect, but as I get better, maybe that could be a talk that really needs to be had. Upgrades and migrations from previous Angular versions. That's I'm not going to be speaking about that. This is not a deep dive into standalone components, but a guide how to initiate your apps without ng modules that we can work through together. So we're going to do a little bit of live coding, and we're going to have fun. It won't be long, it won't be much, but we can do it together. All right. So what is ng modules? What are they? And I'm going to go to the slide so you guys can see it. All right. So ng modules configure the injector and the compiler.
We can't see your slides.
Oh, you can't?
No.
Let's see. Can you guys see it this way? Is that fine?
We only see your camera.
Oh, really? Wow. Yeah. Okay. So I was speaking the whole time thinking you guys could see. But so I have to. Oh, okay. So did I look too crazy?
Hey, Jordy. No, you didn't look. No, we were interested in what you were saying. That's why we didn't say we couldn't see your slides, because we were interested.
Okay. All right. And can you guys see it now?
Yeah, it's coming up. Yeah.
All right. So when in doubt, always go to the Angular docs. One of the biggest reasons why I wanted to do this talk was when we were in the Friday socials, when we were talking about standalone components. Sanders mentioned that he was working on a project where he didn't use ng modules at all. And I think that was like everyone's biggest questions, because as I go on, as you figure out what ng modules are, if you don't know what ng modules are, maybe if you're new, is that ng modules is really the thing that you need to configure your app. So ng modules configure the injector and the compiler and help organize related things together. And ng modules is the reason why I actually started learning Angular, because when you're working on open source projects, they're very they can be very unorganized, right? And one of the project manager's biggest issue, oddly enough, was how to initiate the app. Different frameworks do it differently. You could do it through the script tag, like jQuery used to do it, or React has their own, I guess, set of modules just to initiate the app, just to get started, because all the configuration and setups. So these frameworks really is like you would think that this is not the biggest thing to talk about, but for me, it meant a lot, because ng modules is the thing that made me interested in Angular, because from my understanding, I thought it was the thing that made the app organized. And then Saunders was like, no, that's not what ng modules are. And yes and no, because as you can see, it says it help organize related things together. But really, the big thing about bootstrapping an app is really in the compilation, right? That's where ng modules kind of shine. All right. So what is the bootstrapping process in detail? And I feel like I skipped a step, but that's okay. So step one, it creates the root component. This is typically done in the ng module using the app component, and we'll see how that works later. It injects necessary services. This is done declaring the service, and it imports necessary modules and attaches the root component to the DOM, right? And so we're going to see how that works. And originally I was going to do this in StackBlitz, but maybe about 2 days ago, StackBlitz did something very interesting where they actually changed the way that they do the boilerplate code that they have when you start a project. It actually uses standalone components now, and it kind of thwarted this talk today. So I'm in Sandbox. And as you can see, let's go to the app module. So let's look at the steps. You can see it clear. So it creates the root component, in the declarations property here inside this the ng module decorator. And then it imports necessary modules inside the imports. Here are the providers array, and injects the necessary services. And then with the bootstrap property, it attaches the component to the DOM. So you can see not exactly what happens, but the steps that it takes to what it's kind of doing, why we originally kind of had ng modules. All right, so why would you want to replace ng modules? I think the number one reason why you would want to replace ng modules is that in the beginning, the concepts are more difficult to teach and learn for beginners. Especially when you're a beginner, you're not worried about configuration. You're not worried about maintainability. You don't even really care how it starts. You just want it to work. You just got finished working JavaScript, and you're trying to, create your first apps, and working with ng modules is very confusing. It can get complex. So unnecessary complexity, it can be hard to debug and maintain as they require a lot of boilerplate code. That can be debated a little bit, I think, with the CLI and really with autocomplete. I really think that's kind of over exaggerated, but for a lot of people, for them, ng modules can be very complex. And then one of the main reasons that we had ng modules was the compiler compilation context, right? The compilation context is the thing. Okay, I have it here. So the compilation context refers to the process of converting the Angular template into executable JavaScript code, right? It's the thing that parses the template. It creates that metadata that we just seen earlier, and it generates the factory function that puts our app connect the app to the DOM, right? So but now that we have the Ivy compiler, components have their own compilation context. So we don't really have a reason to kind of use them, maybe. Or it doesn't run at the runtime, so they're not necessarily as necessary as they were prior to the Ivy compiler. All right. So now we can write some code. Let's get started. My favorite part. All right, so where everything is get bootstrapped is in this main TS file right here. So as you can see, with ng modules, we implement those ng modules using the Angular platform browser library. So that platform browser dynamic thing here, that's what we use. And as you see the function here, you see bootstrap module, and right here is at module. We plug it in there, right? So I guess the first step in getting rid of ng modules would be to get rid of this. We don't need it. And we're not doing anything with environment or anything like that. So, all right. I was hoping the intelligence. And where is it? Where is it? I don't know about it. So don't sue me. Don't sue me.
Is it in 4 as well?
when you where is it? Where is it? You can't depend on IntelliSense too much. That's okay. Don't judge.
It's in yeah, sorry, platform browser.
All right. So that's what we do. And we just paste it there. And I'm not too familiar with code there. What's this? Code sandbox. I'm not really too familiar with it. And so with this, you get the Bootstrap application function. All right. So we did that. Bootstrap. See, it works here. It's fine. And what we're going to try to do. And as you see, we have an error, right? The app component is not marked as standalone, and it expects a standalone component. So the second step is we have to, well, first, I guess we should get rid of that app module because that is unnecessary. You don't need that. All right. So there's a new standalone flag. We just set it to true. And there I go, works again. All right. And it's as simple as that. It's really not a lot to it. That's just how it begins, how it starts. And there you go. You bootstrap app without ng modules. And so to compare, to take a look of what else you can do with standalone components and how you can work with it. I have this app, and I do apologize. Honestly, Stackless actually had a lot of problems with implementing a common module. And so working with standalone components a little bit was kind of difficult. But I think this is working. So that's good to know. I had problems earlier, so some of the code that I have won't be on Stackless, and I'll make sure that I have something for you guys to see. So this here is just regular app. It's a material date picker. You know, I have some false, and we're gonna make it pop. Right. And then it goes to this thing. It's nothing special. But if you look at, and this is kind of an example of really just how people will use this in the future. I have this here, shouldn't be there. So as you can see, the way we deal with routes is differently. Maybe I can do another talk on how standalone components work with routing and lazy loading. Because I really wanted to do this in steps, because that's how I learn. So as you can see, we don't have the app routing module. We have a declaration here of routes, and we have the router outlet here. And in the imports right here, we have the common module, because we can't use ng if and ng switch. It doesn't come with standalone components. You have to actually import that. And this is actually in StackBlitz, this was the module that was kind of acting up. And then you have the router module in imports. And this is the special thing here. If you look inside the Bootstrap application, you see a provider's flag. And inside of that, we have import providers from. So that is where you can put dependencies and other modules. When you do, and I'm going to go to another, I'm sorry if it's not as organized as I would like it. All right. So this is another app that I have that also you can see in the main TS file. We have provide HTTP client. So that's instead of using the HTTP client module, they have this function here. And I think over time, there's going to be more functions that has to deal with different libraries to make it, I guess, more customizable of how you want to configure your app. As of right now, we have provide HTTP client, so that replaces the HTTP client module. Also, when you see in the services, we have providing root. So there's really, I think that you should still inject your services like this because it still works. But in providers import from, which I had earlier. Okay, yeah. So the import providers from here, you can also inject your services in that if you need those providers for the root of the application. And that's about it. I do apologize if maybe that was a little unorganized. But if you have any questions, you may ask them, and let me stop sharing my screen. All right.
Right. Thanks, Akilah. One question on the import providers from. Can you put multiple?
Yes. So if I go down, you can see the Bootstrap application function, and you have the app component that's in the main TS file, and then you have this object. And inside of the providers array, you have this function called import providers from. Here you have an example service, and just to show that it's a service, you go to example service that I have right here. And then I have another example service that I have here. And so if you go inside of the main TS file, you see I added both of those inside the providers flag inside the Bootstrap application. So you can add multiple services inside one import provider from.
Anyone else got any more questions? Or
Yeah, I was wondering, how do you import standalone components into other NG modules?
I have a StackBlitz open, and I'm going to give an example exactly how that would work. All right, and so let's go to the example ng module that I have open here. Okay, so you see the ng module decorator inside the imports array. You have this example standalone component, and to show that it is a standalone component, let's go to example standalone. to the TS file. And right here, as you can see, the standard line flag is equal to true. So you would just add it to your ng modules like you would regularly at your standalone components. But you cannot add a non-standalone component inside of another standalone component. You can only import standalone components inside of standalone components. And to give an example here, and let's try to example non-standalone component. And then you get this error here. The component example non-standalone component appears in imports, but it's not a standalone. It cannot be imported directly. It must be imported via ng.
I want to grab I think it was Alex Rickabaugh who did before standalone components came out. We had Alex on to do a spike, and he was just like hypothetically talking about it because people had been asking about it for so long, and he was kind of working on it, but he wasn't really sure. And so he came on Angular Nation and talked a lot about, the challenges and, why we wanted to do this and then what was difficult about it. And then he actually came back and talked again about standalone components once they actually came out and people started using them because everybody had questions. So I want to find a link to that second one where he was like answering a lot of questions, and I'm going to put that in the chat. But also you can go ahead and keep going with the questions. I'm going to find that link.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I hope that means I explained everything well.
Yeah. Well, and then Jordy has a question about the hierarchy of modules.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not 100% sure, but I think, well, with modules before standalone components, you could have multiple hierarchies depending on how you imported services, etc. So I think with standalone components, you'll essentially just have the hierarchy with the standalone components as is. If you have modules in other parts of the app, that hierarchy would be as it was before the standalone components existed. So that's my understanding.
I'm not like super in depth about the subject. I actually was just reading about that, and they have something called, I think, an environmental injector or something that has to deal with the scope. So yeah, I know that maybe that could be another talk I can do, but I'm not necessarily sure. But I know they changed the way that they do the hierarchy to fit ng modules to fix the scope.
And we want to remember when people are talking about like, parent and child, one of the reasons why we wanted to move towards standalone components is because we don't want to put everything all in one big, huge bucket. And that's like the number one thing that people are doing that we want to avoid, because that adds, and that's just so easy. Like you just start building and then you just keep building more and more and more, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so we really want to try not to do that and keep everything in small pieces as much as possible. And we are still going to have a hierarchy, obviously, but we want to make sure that we're not just dumping everything into one big massive app module, because that's what people do if they don't have experience or training. That's what I did for sure.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, I've seen a lot of giant modules with like hundreds of components in them. Yeah.
Seen a lot of funny things with standalone components too, especially with now that we've always had the inject function, but now with the inject function and the way that we do routes, people really have been having lots of funny files, like 3 files for routing. It looks weird, and so I hope someone comes up with a style guide with maybe how they would like to work with standalone components, because it still kind of seems messy.
Yeah. Well, I'd say it's probably a case of waiting for the community to work with them and see what kind of patterns start to emerge, and then there'll be kind of some kind of conventions, I suppose, that will come out.
maybe we could talk more about this in the Friday social with Sonder, and we could have some more. And Akilah, you could move your way on up into the architecture talks as you hang with us and
That's
get more
the plan.
experience. You ask the greatest questions, and I really love watching you go through this journey and figuring it out from step one into the beginning, and then going more and more, because I think you're going to be an architect before you know it.
I hope so. That's my goal in life right now.
Great. Well, I guess I'll say final thank you to Akilah. So if you want to come off mute and thank Akilah for her talk. Great.
Thank you, Akilah.
Thanks, Akilah.
Thank you, Tom.